Hello again, and today it's a great privilege and an honor to say hello to Hannah Rowan from the from the U.S., who's just recently made Aliyah to Israel. And Hannah, you call yourself a healer of medically incurable conditions.
Yeah, that's what has come about over time.
Okay.
Also chronic conditions, but for myself and my daughters and my patients, I've taken on some cases that have actually been medically incurable cases that I've been able to solve and resolve and bring back into health. Okay,
but I'm sure you would agree, Hannah, that it's not you who does the healing.
Oh, of course, yeah. I'm just sort of a helper. Someone that's willing to put their hands and let the divine do the work. Of course, yeah, this is where all healing comes from. So,
and you know, I want to say that Hannah's been working with me, and I've had amazing results.
Very good.
My whole spinal cord is straightened out to an extent much more than it was after just a few treatments. And I have more energy.
Great.
And so far so good, and so far, well, when you say that phrase, I believe it.
Yeah, it's been amazing for me to witness your progress, because the first time I came, the spine was twisted in several different ways, multiple directions. And when I came back the second time, the spine was straight.
That's right.
So we've continued working, and last time I was here, we had your wife take a look at it, and I'm just so amazed.
And she saw it as well.
I'm so amazed that it's so straight. Baruch Hashem, it's a gift from God.
Okay, yes. Yeah. And I'm very grateful to God and to you. Okay, Hannah, but still, that's quite a statement. People who have abilities like this, very often they've gone through great crisis in their lives.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's the case with you also, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how your path as a spiritual seeker and the healer began.
Yeah, sure. About 12 years ago, I was suffering from some really serious medical conditions. Mostly at the time it was severe acid reflux.
Okay, now explain what that is.
Okay. Basically, the stomach acids are coming up due to severe stress. And in my case, it got so bad that my vocal cords actually became like fried and I lost my voice.
Burned out.
Yeah. And I was going to medical doctors, and they kept giving me more and more prescription drugs, which would temporarily help with the symptoms. But overall, over time, the condition was getting worse and worse.
Which is often the case with this type of medication.
Yeah, because unfortunately, for chronic conditions, not necessarily other types of conditions, there's a time and a place for every kind of medicine. But I found that for chronic conditions, often the natural way tends to give better results, because the pharmaceutical drugs are tending to contract and trying to suppress symptoms, and basically they're affecting a weak area, an area that's already weak, and forcing it to do something that it's not able to do. And in the process, the area becomes weaker. So it just gets into a vicious cycle. So for me, also the esophagus became about 80% non-functional.
Wow, this sounds incredibly terrible.
Yeah, scary, especially when I had two small daughters at the time. So my doctor sent me to do this. It was sort of an x-ray, but it was where you had to drink some liquid that turns things blue inside when they look at the x-ray. I'm sorry, I don't know the technical terms. So they did this x-ray, and it was like a video. So there was motion visible. So when I did this test, they told me that the esophagus was about 80% non-functional, and they told me that the liquid that they gave me to take took about 20 minutes for me to swallow. I mean, liquid.
Wow.
So that was pretty scary. And obviously it was very difficult to eat food, and I was having a lot of trouble. So I was really starting to get scared, because I had seen that this condition was getting worse over time. And so at that time, the person who would become my mentor of Chinese medicine came to Puerto Rico where I was living. He came on vacation, and I had a cranial sacral therapist that I was working with, and she introduced me to him. So he met with me and started to work with me to decipher what the causes were of this illness, and started to connect me with solutions. So while he was there, he gave some workshops on ancient Chinese medicine, and I was so fascinated with it. I just fell in love with it. And as I started to have progress myself, I thought, wow, I want to do this. So I wanted to do it, as a profession and help other people.
You saw it was helping you.
Yeah, I did. I was able to reverse the condition completely.
Amazing.
Yeah. That I was told that it was medically incurable, and that all I could do was continue to take the medications and to be on a very strict diet. So I was able to heal the entire system.
Amazing.
Yeah. So.
But that was also the beginning of your spiritual path.
Yeah, maybe. It's very interesting how these things come together.
Let's hear about that as well.
Yeah. Well, I think at the time, the next thing that happened was I started to get involved in yoga. And
while you were sick?
Yeah. I was always doing sports. I was very active, and so I realized that as I was getting a little bit older, approaching the late 30s and the early 40s, that I was having more tendency to get injuries, and I thought, wow, I really need to do yoga. Like that would help loosen me up. So I started a yoga class, and it was helping me physically, but I also noticed it was helping me, spiritually, emotionally, and things like this. So then I got more and more involved with this, and I began to study meditation and yoga philosophy, and this all helped also, the whole overall picture of why I was getting the illnesses and things. So it just started to bring balance to my life.
So this is why you were in the crisis, yes?
Yeah, it really helped me through. Because healing, for me, I found that healing, it's not just one thing that you do that's a solution. For me, it's what I like to call your own personal recipe. So I found my own personal recipe. So I took some yoga and meditation. I used Chinese herbs, oriental body work, cranial sacral therapy, and then a lot of other techniques that came along, whatever Hashem brought me in contact with, past life regressions and intuitive reflexology and all kinds of things. And as I was becoming more and more interested in natural medicine, I decided that I was on this quest to see which methods worked and which were valid, and how much each different method could help for different situations. So I kind of did a sort of research and took a survey. I wanted to become a connoisseur of natural medicine. So even now, I've studied and practiced several different techniques, which I feel give me a pretty good range for covering a range of conditions. But if somebody needs something additional, then at least I can say, oh, you should add in a little bit of this, or make sure you're doing some of that. So I can also, help people to find their own recipe.
Okay. I remember you told a story to me once, sitting on the beach in Puerto Rico.
Oh, yeah.
And having a vision.
Yeah. So as I was exploring yoga, I was working with a spiritual teacher from India, a major yoga philosophy path.
Who?
I don't know if I should say the name or not.
Well, why not? If it's,
okay.
If she helped you, if she's a genuine
yeah, many people
teacher.
know of City Yoga and Guru Mai, and so I did research and explored myself, and I went to the ashram. I wanted to see if this was real and a place where I could put my trust, and I did find that I could do that with City Yoga. So I was going through a difficult divorce, and there were a lot of heavy emotions, and we split up.
Which was connected to your throat problems.
Yeah, exactly. So at one point, we split up, and I was in the house by myself, and I wasn't sure what to do next. So I went out to the beach. Like I said, I was living in Puerto Rico, and I just kind of had a little chat with Gurmai, which you can do with these tzaddikim. You can access them sort of wherever you are.
With a great master, yes.
Yeah, with a great master, yeah. So I kind of just said, Gurmai, I know I'm going in the right direction, but I don't know what's the next step to take. I don't know what to do next. And the interesting thing for me was that then God answered.
Okay.
Hashem answered. And I got this answer, and it was very interesting because I could see it, but it wasn't physical, and I could hear it, but it wasn't a sound.
Yes.
It's hard to describe, but it was this message that filled the whole beach. As I looked down the beach, it filled the whole beach, and the message was that you will soon be leaving Puerto Rico. And I thought that I was there permanently.
Yes.
Being married there, and I had been there 20 years while I was married.
Had your children?
Yeah, my children, and I had friends, and I had, my whole life there, so I didn't know that I would ever leave. So when I heard that, the truth of it just brought me so much joy that it was so funny. For a moment I thought, it doesn't matter if I'm divorced or married or what the situation is. I just felt full of joy, and I just felt like I was definitely being guided and led to the next step. And I did end up leaving just a couple of months later, just a few short months later, and going to Phoenix.
Okay, why Phoenix?
Yeah, Phoenix. I told you that my eventual mentor was teaching. Well, he's from Phoenix.
He's Chinese expert.
Yeah. Ancient Chinese medicine. So while I was still in Puerto Rico,
what's his name?
His name is Joel Senior.
Okay.
And he teaches at the place where I study. It's called Southwest Institute of Healing Arts.
Okay.
So it's a very unique college in Tempe, Arizona, which is basically part of Phoenix. It's completely for the healing arts. Mm-hmm. So it's like a candy store of all the healing arts, all the different techniques. So while I was still in Puerto Rico, I used to actually take study trips up to Phoenix from Puerto Rico, stay a couple of weeks, take some classes, and go back and forth. So I was really commuting from long distance.
Wow.
And I was taking some basic courses in ancient Chinese medicine. And the more I learned, then the more I could start putting to use right away. So then when I had the opportunity to move back to the States, I thought, well, if I live near that college, then I can really study and I can get my diplomas. And I can really do this as a full-time profession.
Yes.
And then also my daughters had become interested in the Waldorf schools, Rudolf Steiner education. And I found out that there was also a Rudolf Steiner school in Phoenix, and so then I thought, well, if we go to Phoenix, we can all study, and it'll be good for all of us. So it was.
And it was.
It was. Yeah.
Okay. So by the time you went to Phoenix, this esophagus and throat problem, that was much better.
Yeah, that was much better. Then the divorce itself was really difficult. It went on for several years, and I guess because of prolonged stress, at the end of the time in Puerto Rico, I was having a lot of migraines.
Yes.
And then when I got to Phoenix, I discovered that I had 2 brain tumors and a liver tumor.
My God.
All at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was very interesting because I had the same symptoms as my mother-in-law. She had also a brain tumor. And I remember when she first started, she had blurry vision and different kind of things. And I was experiencing the same symptoms. But something else that was really interesting to experience, looking at it from the observer, was that I also had some brain damage. Okay. So as I was taking my Chinese medicine classes, sometimes the teacher would tell us, okay, let's work on such and such points, acupuncture points. And I would think, okay, I know where those are. But I couldn't remember them. It's like when the computer's slow, yes, and you're like waiting. And so I was like, okay, like where is it? And my brain was so slow. And the other interesting thing that was happening, which was very entertaining for my daughters, was that when I would speak, I would say things opposite. Like if it was hot, I would say, "Oh, it's really cold in here." Or if I wanted them to close the door, I would say, "Open the door," and they would start laughing. I thought, well, that's really interesting because I would say the exact opposite. I thought that's interesting that the brain can do that when something's affecting it.
That is very interesting. Okay, so here you are with tremendously serious problems.
Yeah.
2 brain tumors and a liver tumor, and also something in the reproductive system as well, right?
Yeah, I had some ovarian cysts.
Yeah.
And I think I had a breast cyst also at one time. So very stressful time with the divorce.
So what saved you? Because right now...
I'm fine now. Well, I continued working with my mentor and with other healers that I had come to know in Phoenix, and also doing a lot of self-work. So I guess a brain tumor is something that a lot of people think it's really scary. Like some people might say, oh, sure, natural medicine is great. But if you get something really serious like a brain tumor, then you got to go to the doctors.
Yeah,
so here I found myself with that situation, and I thought, I'm studying this medicine. I'm beginning to practice this medicine. I need to know if it really works. So I was putting my own life on the line.
Yes.
And it took a lot of courage because so many people around me were saying, well, you should at least go to the doctor and get an MRI and stuff like that. But I had worked with my mentor enough years that I trusted his diagnostic methods. He does like pulse reading and different diagnostic methods, which I had seen over a few years were extremely accurate. Then just to double check and get a second opinion, I went to other healers of natural medicine who had their own diagnostic techniques.
Yes.
Such as a friend of mine, he was an amazing reflexologist, but he was extremely intuitive. So I would go to him and I would say, how do you feel the tumor? And he would say, okay, I feel it shrinking and stuff like that. So, you know, just like people say to go to a doctor for a second opinion or third opinion. So I did this with different healers that I knew were very reliable and did very good work. I also thought that if I went to do an MRI, that the brain tumor would be on my medical record forever. And they wouldn't have ever considered that it would be healed. And so then my medical insurance would be astronomical for the rest of my life.
Yes.
Which I got very minimal health insurance while I was living in America, because I don't really use conventional medicine almost at all. So I thought, well, let's see what I can do. And it was worth it because I was able to heal it 100%.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. How many years ago?
This was about like 10 years ago.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
10 years ago.
And now you're helping people like me, and and with quite a few clients. Also, you've had quite a few. An amazing story.
And I think besides the fact that I've studied Chinese medicine in depth, I have had a large number of other illnesses. I don't know, sometimes I wonder if I've had more illnesses than any other individual person on the planet. I mean, I suspect that could maybe be true. But I feel like it's happened to me, it's like it's been my education. Because I've had a number of different illnesses, things like pancreatitis.
My God.
And one time I had this other thing called flukes. You know when people say it's a fluke?
I got that. Isn't that a worm?
Yeah, it's like some kind of parasite in the liver that it's medically impossible to detect. And I was able to get some herbs from my mentor and got rid of it. It was a little tricky because I think I had the pancreatitis at the same time. So to have poor digestion and flukes at the same time was really scary. I mean, I was seeing my ribs showing, and
oh my God.
I was skinnier than my daughters, and went down to size 0 in clothing, and it was pretty scary. But anyway, what I found was that holding on to a belief that there's a solution for every problem in the world, which I've come to really believe wholeheartedly. I just kept holding on and doing whatever healing work I needed to do, and spiritual practices, and sometimes therapy, and whatever it took, and just keep working it until I would get clear of each condition.
Well, that demonstrates an incredibly powerful will.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have to. I think probably the best quality that we can have when we're trying to do healing is discipline. Discipline. And I guess faith, because a lot of times people start with either a healing technique or a natural remedy, and they'll get scared off. Like they'll have something going on in their life, maybe a stressful situation, and they'll think, oh, I'm starting to feel bad, it must be these herbs, or it must be that new therapy. When it's like the stress, or maybe they ate some bad food and they got food poisoning, but they'll blame it on the natural medicine. So, and then a lot of times I'll have people come to me, and they'll be making progress, and they'll just stop coming. They'll maybe come 2 or 3 times, and we get really excited, and we see a lot of progress, and then they'll just stop coming. It's just the discipline, the commitment to follow something through is sometimes lacking.
Yes.
So, I don't know. I mean, I try to motivate people as best I can. But, you know, I mean, people have to put in their part as well. You have to put in some self-effort and receive healing together at the same
yes,
time.
Of course. Tell me about the 5 breakers.
Oh, okay, great, yeah. Well, in Chinese medicine, there's a theory, an ancient theory, that's called the 5-element theory. And it's a system of looking at health and disease in the body, how the body works, the relationship between the organ systems. And when I became very familiar with it and I needed to explain it to patients, it reminded me quite a bit of the breakers, the electrical breakers in the house. So you know that if a certain breaker goes out, then there's certain lights and electrical appliances that will all go out at the same time.
Because they're all on the same circuit.
Because they're all on the same line.
Circuit or breaker, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I realized that I could use this as an analogy for the 5-element system. So I'll give you an example with the healing that I did with my daughter, so that you can see an example of how the liver breaker works in an actual case.
The liver breaker, would that be fire, air, water?
Okay, so liver in Chinese medicine is called wood.
Okay.
And what's on the same breaker with the liver is the nerves, the eyes, and the brain. And so the liver sends energy up to the eyes and to the brain and to the nerves. So any illnesses that are related to these areas, then what needs to be addressed is the liver, because it's the major governing organ of this breaker.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and there's 5 breakers, 5 elements, and so we can almost say that in Chinese medicine there's 5 types of illnesses. Whereas if you look at a medical encyclopedia, which I have also for reference, if people come and tell me they have such and such condition and I've never heard of it, so I look it up and I say, oh, this is a water element, you know, it's something with the kidneys, so we need to work on that. So there's only 5 kinds. So it's really amazing. So for example, with my daughter, when she was in 5th grade, she began to have, well, it began to show that she had learning disabilities. So the school brought it to my attention, and we brought her to be professionally diagnosed, and they did find that she had learning disabilities. And at the same time, she also was starting to have vision problems, so she recently started using glasses. And she also had OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. She was pulling out her eyebrows and her eyelashes. Yeah. She didn't want to do it, but it was just, you know, it's this behavior that you can't control it when you have it. Yes. It's just a stress or nervous behavior. She also tended to be depressed and moody. So all of these are liver source.
Okay.
So once again, they're all the liver breaker. Yeah. The eyes, the brain, the nerves. At this time I was just beginning to practice Chinese medicine, and I thought, well, let's see if it works.
Okay.
And we were told that her conditions were medically incurable, and that she would just have to learn how to cope with it, and that we would, set her up with different crutches to help her get through things. But imagine, she was in 5th grade, and this is a time when kids start having exams and little tests and things, and she couldn't memorize things.
Yes.
And they told me that the screen that you have, like in your brain, where you memorize something and hold an image or a word, as you memorize something, they said she doesn't have that screen. So it was really difficult helping her study for tests. I mean, I had to create songs and draw cartoons and do whatever I could to try to get her to memorize things. So it was really challenging. So I started working doing some oriental body work. What I do, it's called Tuina. So it's basically working the acupuncture points and meridians, but with my hands, not with needles. So obviously in the ancient times, they weren't able to manufacture needles. So they used the hands. And I really like using the hands because I can give individual attention to each point. Because a certain point, the needle sometimes might feel like it's a bit much if the point is really, really sore. And I know that they tend to put the needles in for a standard amount of time, like 20 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever. But I work the points as much time as they need to clear. And they do tend to clear pretty quickly, just usually in a few moments, even the really challenging ones. And then also working the meridians. And I also got her some Chinese herbal formulas, and I took her out of her school, which was very academically, difficult, and I started to do homeschooling with the Rudolf Steiner method.
Wow.
So again, this was her personal recipe. So about 6 weeks later, she was healed of 90% of all these conditions. Stopped using the eyeglasses. She became to be very calm. She could memorize things, and she started to have a very calm and pleasant personality. And I brought her case study to show you last time I was here.
Yes, I saw.
And you could see.
The photos, amazing differences. In one photo when she was young and having the problem, you could see that this is a very, very disabled young woman. You could see very clearly in the eyes. And the photo of how she is now is incredible. Tell us about how she is now. Yeah. Back to that first photo, you could see that the eyes were almost like cross-eyed and just looked very tense, very disturbed. And I showed you a picture shortly later when she was in junior high. Yes, that's right. And the face was soft, the eyes were soft and very much in alignment. That's right. And then as she got into high school, she started to do excellent work, and she became an honor student and straight A student. Amazing. So that takes a lot of organization, and of course the ability to memorize, and self-motivation. And then as she went through high school, she was doing really, really well. And when she graduated from high school, she received 3 offers for full academic scholarship to major universities. That's incredible. So this was the girl that her junior high politely told us that she wouldn't be welcome there anymore, that she wouldn't be able to handle it. So if we would have believed them and not tried to find solutions, we wouldn't have, number one, we wouldn't have known what she was capable of, but also her entire personality was different. Now she's so pleasant, calm, centered. When I tell people how she used to be, they say, "Oh, no way, not her." She's an honor student. She's very connected to wisdom, a lot of integrity, and very pleasant. It's just it's like night and day. Her personality change. I would call that a healer of medically incurable conditions. Okay. And you've done it over and over. I know you have. And you said something to me once. You said you were going to school learning healing, the healing arts, and you had to take a conventional course as well. Oh, yeah. And that was difficult. Yeah, my college, the college I went to, it's accredited, which is great. But that means that it also has courses that are required, in other institutions. So especially we had to take this class in pathology. And we had to use a regular textbook that would be used in other institutions. And it was really hard for me to take that class because a lot of the conditions that we studied, the book would say, the source of this illness is not known. And I would write in my book, I know it. In the next classroom, they're teaching it. And so sometimes it was funny and sometimes it would irk me. And they would say incurable. Yeah, they would say there's no medical cure for this.
And so I was like, yeah, there is. In this classroom, there's one method, and 2 doors down, there's another method. So, and then it was funny, one day, we were talking about, I think it was Alzheimer's, and we were going over the symptoms, and I raised my hand, and the teacher was starting to realize, that I was kind of, I don't know, still kind of different little kind of student that I would make kind of unusual comments.
Not a good party member.
Yeah, I wasn't fitting in that box too well. But, always trying to be respectful, but, sometimes you need to speak up and share. Mm-hmm. So we were talking about Alzheimer's, and I said, I was studying these symptoms last night, and I thought, this is exactly what my daughter had. Usually think of Alzheimer's as a condition for elderly people. And the teacher just looked at me and he said, wow, and how old is your daughter? And I was like, whatever, 12 or whatever. And he said, wow, that's a very interesting theory. I've never heard that before, that a child could have Alzheimer's. And I was so silly what I said. I said, of course not. It just occurred to me right now. That's why you've never heard of it before. So, anyway.
But it's so sad, they close the door. People who will only go on that path, and they're told, well, we don't know why it's happening, and there's nothing that can be done. And then they just wait to die.
I know.
And that's a shame. And that the medical establishment closes the door to investigating ancient practices that work.
I know.
I would call it criminal, frankly. Yeah. Okay. So these are amazing things that I've heard before, but not exactly in the way you tell it. Very powerfully. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I can share with you that before I made Aliyah, I was doing
before
a lot
you came to Israel. Aliyah means to immigrate to Israel.
Yeah, I call it Aliyah in Hebrew. It means going up.
Yes, because Jerusalem is up. It's like sort of a mountain city, sort of.
Yeah.
So to go to Jerusalem, to go to the city of Zion, you go up. Yes.
Yeah, and also it's supposed to mean spiritually as well, that you're doing a very high spiritual thing. So the last couple of years that I was in Phoenix, I started to do a lot of infertility work. So women, we have more complicated systems than men. So maybe that's why it seems like we might have more conditions than men do.
Yeah.
So when they would come to me, it was very common that they had multiple things going on. They might have, something with the bladder and something here and this and that and, insomnia and whatever. And so for me, my favorite part of the session was when someone would first come and they would be bewildered and they wouldn't understand what was happening to their own body. And they would also kind of feel hopeless. And a lot of times very emotional, especially with the infertility issue. So what I enjoy doing very much is sitting down with them and recording what their symptoms are and what's going on, and then in my head putting together the puzzle of what's going on with them according to the 5 elements and other methods that I've used to diagnose, and sort of like untangling this ball of string until it's simple, and then sharing with them, okay, here's why this is happening, here's why that's happening, and here's how we can solve this. And such a sense of relief.
Wow.
To explain, and every time they would say, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense, and that's why this was bothering me and that, and now I see that they're related and what the connections are. Oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. And then for the person to have a sense of hope that, wow, there's a solution for this, I'm not doomed. Oh, I just love that part of the first session. And also when I'm working with people, the techniques that I use, you feel results immediately. So I know that when I first started using natural medicine, to tell you the truth, it was for the first couple of years that I had my doubts, like, is this going to work? Is this based on truth? And I know that process because it's a new belief system, so it takes a while to transition away from traditional medicine. So I know it's hard at the beginning to believe and to put your trust in a different system. So I'm happy that I've been connected with techniques that you can feel instant relief, so that you can say, oh yeah, this is working, so...
simple stuff like an asthma attack, like brushing the meridians on the arm.
Yeah.
The simplest thing you could imagine.
Yeah, it's healing is often pretty simple. Again, it takes consistency and discipline to do it. Yes. But the principles are actually pretty simple. Yeah. My mentor would say the universe is embarrassingly simple. So
I like that.
Yeah, I mean it's true. Well, we know that we all came from one source, and as we fell as humans, we fell into complicated situations and diversity and.
Or you could call it falling or exploring.
Yeah. But the principles that that God put on the earth for us to heal often can be pretty simple, which, because people are used to the medical system, which can be very complicated, sometimes the simplicity of it they don't even trust. It's like, what? That's too simple.
And they don't want to.
Sorry.
They're not open enough for the simple.
Yeah.
Too bad.
Yeah.
Okay, now you've used the phrase Hashem a couple of times.
Okay, yeah.
Which in Hebrew means the name.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very often what a religious Jew will call God. They'll call him, her, whatever, the name. Okay? Mm-hmm. So these tremendous crises, physical, life-threatening crises that you experienced over and over, they brought you on a spiritual path that eventually has led you here.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear about that journey.
Okay.
If you can.
Yeah.
Starting at the beginning, which is a good place to start.
Yeah, it's interesting now, because for me the story started kind of in the middle, but then once I started to become interested in Judaism, and I turned and I looked back at my past, I saw some clues that I was destined to embrace Judaism. So,
all right, but when did you first start getting interested in Judaism?
Okay, yeah. So I'll start kind of from the middle, and in chronological order. This is the way it happened. So as I started to do my healing, and also the yoga meditation started kind of hand in hand, and I think it's common for spirituality and healing to kind of come together. Yes. I mean, as God, all healing comes from God. It makes sense. So I was involved in yoga, and I just had this hunger for knowledge of the truth and spiritual things and mystical things. And so I started to just read and research everything spiritual, everything mystical, all the different spiritual and mystical paths on the earth, and all kinds of things. And sometimes I would, when I took my study trips up to Phoenix, I would go to Borders or a bookstore, or maybe one of the metaphysical bookstores in Phoenix, and I would just sit on the floor and give myself like 4 or 5 hours, when on a day I didn't have classes or something, and I would just pull all these different books off the shelf, and I would read something that said such and such, maybe the Freemasons, or Kabbalah, or different.
We don't want to talk about them.
Yeah, all kinds of, the good, the bad, whatever. Anything that was related to mystical, I just started exploring it, and educating myself. So I heard about Kabbalah, and I was living in Puerto Rico, so I thought, well, Puerto Rico's not a place where I have much access to Kabbalah. So I thought, when I get to Phoenix and I get settled, then I'll start to explore that. And at the time, I thought it was just one more thing to study. I studied, Native American philosophies, and of course yoga, Taoism, Sufism, some Buddhism and Zen Buddhism and Tibetan wisdom and all different things, and comparing and all this. So I thought, okay, Kabbalah's next on the list. So I found an amazing teacher in Phoenix that I really benefited from his teachings.
Pardon me, but wasn't there something in Puerto Rico, you got into a synagogue by accident?
Yeah, well, actually, then when I turned around to look back, I had a friend in Puerto Rico who was a yoga teacher, and she was Jewish, and so she gave classes in the Jewish Community Center in San Juan.
Yes.
So when I would go to her class, then when I would go up to the women's locker room to change after, it was very close to the synagogue. So there was a synagogue in the Jewish Community Center. And nobody was around, and I didn't know if I was breaking some rule or something, but I would peek into the synagogue, and this particular one was very ornate and had a lot of different things, and then of course the holy books, and I don't know, I just would peek in there and I would think, I want to know what all this is, but also it felt very familiar to me somehow. Like I felt like somehow I maybe already knew what it was. Mm-hmm. I was very intrigued by it. And looking back further, when I was small, my favorite book was Diary of Anne Frank, and my favorite movie was Fiddler on the Roof, and I just thought that everybody liked these things. I didn't think there was anything special about it.
Oh, that's, as you know, that's very unusual.
Oh,
both of those things.
I thought, everybody likes that book, everyone likes that movie, but I just loved them. They were my favorites. So then I went to Phoenix. I started to study Kabbalah, and as I began to study the more mystical aspects of Judaism, I started to crave what the basics were. What is this based on? What's the basics of Judaism? So a friend of mine told me that Chabad, this is a certain kind of synagogue that's common throughout the world, institution.
Yeah, it's a religious, sort of Hasidic, but
it's Orthodox. It's Orthodox.
Orthodox.
But they are all open to mystical ideas.
And modern ideas, and to the modern.
Yeah.
They're very modern, unlike some streams of very religious Judaism.
Yeah, and plus Chabad is very tolerant of all people,
That's
of all
correct.
different kinds of people, which is very beautiful.
Okay.
So I started to take classes at Chabad in basic Judaism, and as I would study the basics of Judaism, I guess because of my previous studies in mysticism, I could read in between the lines the mystical aspects of the basic practices in Judaism.
Yes.
So, I became more and more intrigued, and I think a couple of friends who were Jewish suggested, maybe you have a Jewish soul, and maybe you should convert to Judaism. Maybe that's what's happening with you. I mean, people don't try to convert people to Judaism, but
no, it's not a proselytizing religion.
Yeah,
you don't go try to convince people.
Yeah, but they were more observing what was happening with me,
right,
and trying to help me in my search for understanding of this huge interest that I had. And at first, I said, I don't believe in religions, and I don't have any need for religion. I have my yoga meditation, and I'm fine, and things like that.
That's what I usually say to my New Age friends, who are most, they're all saying stuff like that. Yes.
Yeah. So that was my initial attitude. And then some interesting things started to happen, which I've shared with you a little bit.
Well, let's share it with everyone.
Okay. So I think the first thing that happened was I went to see a friend of mine, and I went to see him at his office, Shalom Siegel.
Shalom.
That you've interviewed also.
Hopefully one day they'll see that, yes.
Yeah, he's an excellent, I think we should call him a spiritual psychotherapist.
Yes.
Yeah. So, a very dear friend.
A tremendously talented teacher.
Spiritual teacher.
Yes.
And also Orthodox Jew.
Yes.
So, he was a fellow member of this mystical Kabbalah study group where I started. So I went to visit him at his office, and he was a close friend, and so sometimes we would go to plays of the Arizona Jewish Theater. So he said, hey, look, there's this play coming. It's about the Kindertransport.
The transfer, the rescue of Jewish children from German Jewish children to England. Like 10,000 children were sent to England.
During the times of the Nazis.
At the early times, to save their lives. Yeah. They wouldn't take the parents, but they would take the children. Yeah.
And so he handed me the postcard about this play, based on
a certain number of them, yes.
Yeah. And I looked at it, and I just started crying.
The postcard of the play.
Yeah, the postcard advertising the play. I started crying, and then I started crying really hard for like about 10 or 15 minutes, like I couldn't stop. And Shalom was saying, what's happening with you? And I was like, I don't know what's happening with me. And he said, were you there, or did you somehow have this experience, like obviously like past life? And I said, I don't know what this is all about. So we went to the play, and they had set up on the walls different newspaper articles and writings about the Kindertransport, so that you could kind of look at this exhibit before going into the play. And as I was walking around looking at them, I was crying, and I was crying during the play, and so something was just resonating with me, that some familiarity. Then the next thing that happened was that I decided to go listen to this guest speaker who came to Phoenix. I think his name is Leon Layson, and he was the youngest member of Schindler's List. You know the movie?
He was the youngest person. He was a boy at the time, who was saved by Schindler. Of course, the very, very famous movie of Steven Spielberg, based on the true story about a great German man who saved, I don't know how many Jews, by giving them work and saving their lives in that way. 1,500 Jews or whatever it was.
Yeah, took them into his factory and hired them so that they wouldn't be killed.
Okay, the great Spielberg true story movie.
Yeah. So this gentleman, Leon Layson, when I heard him just a few years ago, he was like in his 80s, and the most humble man you can imagine, and peaceful, and he held no grudge toward anyone for what had happened. Just talked about his life before the Nazis came, and what a wonderful person Schindler was, such a giving and attentive and respectful person, and all this. So I was really impressed with his talk.
Sure, and Schindler, of course, was just a German Christian who had Nazi connections. And that's how he saved the Jews. He just decided that these people are humans and they should be saved.
Yeah. So then when he finished his talk, well, first of all, I was impressed because his talk was in this huge ballroom. There were just hundreds and hundreds of people that came to hear him. It was amazing how many people came out to hear him. And so then after his talk, he was willing to take questions.
Yes.
So I raised my hand, and I felt like I had a burning question. I didn't even know what my question was yet, and I just felt like I wanted to ask him something, and I thought, what's my question? What's my question? But he didn't call on me. I mean, the room was really huge. So I thought, well, afterwards I'll go up to him and I'll ask him my question. Well, thank goodness I did, because now I know why it wasn't meant to be for him to call on me, because what happened. So I went up and I asked him my question, and the question that came forth from my soul, was that I said, in the camps, were the people able to figure out ways to do their Jewish spiritual practices even though they were in the camp? And then what he answered me, it wasn't even exactly about the camps. What he answered me was a memory that I had for my whole life, that in that moment I realized it was a memory.
Okay.
So what he answered was about the trains that would take people to the camps. And he said, well...
The terrible trains where they were crammed in.
Yes, people packed in like sardines, not knowing where they're going.
And no bath facilities.
Yeah.
Terrible. Many people died on those trains.
Yeah. So I would always, whenever I would see these movies like Schindler's List, and the other one, I think it was called The Piano Player, and
Oh, I saw that too.
Yeah, that movie. That movie, I really I really resonated with that story, and I think also I had some memories from that movie, thinking back, But so whenever I would see these movies, I would see they would show the trains sometimes in the movies, and I would always think, if that situation ever happened to me, I would need to be at least near this little open window where one of the slats of the windows had broken off. I would have to be near this little broken slat of window, so that I could at least see a little sunlight, and I could at least feel like I could breathe. If that were to happen to me, that's the only way I could survive. So when he answered me, he said, well, on the trains, in the early morning, as Orthodox Jews do, they look to face east, and they do their morning prayers. He said on the trains, the men were trying to figure out which way was east so they could do their prayers. And when he said the trains, I just started crying uncontrollably. I mean, I was standing in front of him, and there were so many people around me, so I didn't want to totally lose it, but I could barely hold it back. Because in that moment I realized that the train was a memory. It wasn't like, what if this were to happen to me?
And why did he answer about trains?
I know. Why did he answer about trains? I asked about the camps.
The camps.
Yeah.
It's like in his soul, he knew exactly what to say.
Yeah. The words. The answer obviously came from above. So then, I mean, I just started crying. I couldn't hold it back. It was so strong, the need to cry. And then I just was like, thank you. Like I couldn't even speak, and I just almost ran to the ladies' restroom, and it just all this emotion and this feeling to cry like from my guts just came up, and there was like, it was a really big restroom in this nice hotel, and I could tell that if I really cried the way I needed to, it was going to be really loud. But I also knew from my healing experiences that I needed to let it out. So I started to let it out, but I was trying not to be too loud. I didn't want to scare people. They think something like I was having a heart attack or something. So I started crying, and it was just like coming from my guts. And so then I started to, this is how I started to realize that I had been a victim of the Holocaust, that I had been there.
You had been in that train.
And I had been in the train. It was a memory that I really, once I saw it clearly, I realized I had remembered it like for my whole life. And also in the Kabbalah study group that Shalom and I were in, I went to consult with this intuitive healer that was part of the group. And I told her, I said, you know, I've been having these feelings and these memories that I was a Holocaust victim. And she said, of course you are. I knew that from the first time I saw you. And I was like, are you serious? And she said, yes. And I'd known her a couple of years from the group. And she said, you were a man. I could see it all clearly. And I said, oh, I was a man. That makes so much sense. Because I remembered then that when I was a little girl, when I would picture myself grown up, I would picture myself as a businessman.
Right.
Isn't that weird? And I think, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be wearing a suit and I'm going to be a businessman. Because that's what it meant for me to be an adult. And
well, you know, you look very Jewish, actually.
I don't know. Maybe that's what my soul is. So
okay.
Then also as I started to really contemplate this, and then I realized that I also remembered. It made sense that I was a man because I also started to have this very strong memory that I saw my family across the street, a woman and some kids. And they were, they had suitcases as if they were leaving to go into hiding or leaving the country. And
or being moved into a ghetto.
Or moved into, being moved somewhere. And at first, I thought that I was the woman, but then when you have a memory, you don't see yourself. You see like what your eyes are seeing.
That's what you would have seen.
Yeah, and so I would always see the woman and the children. So I must have been somewhere else, like across the street or hidden somewhere. So maybe my kids did go on the kinder transport.
Maybe they did.
You know, and that was probably just emotionally devastating for me.
If they were very, very lucky.
Yeah.
And one of the 10,000 chosen. There were, of course, hundreds of thousands who weren't chosen. Millions. Anyway, who weren't chosen.
Yeah. Well, I also wanted to, the last thing I would like to say about this experience that I remembered was about my death in the gas chamber, because I remembered, as I began contemplating this, I remembered my experience, but I remember it as a very beautiful spiritual experience.
When you died in the gas chamber.
Yes. So
tell us about that.
I'm wondering if I was a very religious or a very spiritual Jewish man back then, because I remember going into the gas chamber, and at this point, you know, you're hopeless. You know, what else do you have?
Nothing. You're waiting to die.
You're hopeless. Yeah.
And you're afraid of the pain, I suppose.
Yeah. But I guess the gas chamber, maybe it's, I don't know how painful or not painful. I don't know.
Well, the pain of inhaling poison.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them were afraid, and I think a lot of them died in pain.
Yeah.
But maybe some, maybe some are able to just leave quickly.
Yeah. That's sort of what I remember. I remember holding someone's hand, and I have a friend that I know currently that's alive right now that I suspect it might have been her, and whatever, maybe she was also a man, I don't know. And I remember just focusing on Hashem and I guess kind of picturing light. I don't know if I was picturing it or if I was seeing it, but I just remember light and just going into the light.
Wow.
Just going into light. And so I don't remember, pain or anything. I just remember, I don't know, going into light, going into...
I think very often in these situations, which maybe we think are terribly painful, our soul knows to leave right away, or Spirit brings us out, or God brings us out right away.
Maybe that's what happens with martyrs. Maybe Hashem has mercy and just pulls the spirit out before the body.
I think it often happens that way. So, Hannah, I would love you to talk about what Hashem is for you and why you've come to Israel.
Okay.
And again, starting as early as is appropriate.
Yeah. So, well, once I started to realize that it seemed that I was probably a Jewish soul, or I had been Jewish in my past life, and as I began exploring that more and more, I had 2 other memories of past Jewish lives.
Okay.
So then the question for me became, why wasn't I born Jewish this time? I mean, I might have been afraid, like, okay,
no.
didn't go so well last time, so maybe I'm a little bit afraid this time. But I thought, I started to ask Hashem, what do you want me to do this time? Do you want me to be Jewish or non-Jewish? Because that's probably the most important question, is what's your will for me this lifetime? So I think the next things that happened were that I really started to explore conversion seriously. And I started to explore the basic practices of Judaism with an eye to see, is this based on truth, or did humans make this up? I wanted to know if it was true and valid.
Yes.
Okay. So one of the first things that happened to me was I thought, well, okay, I'm going to make a commitment to only eat kosher food from now on.
Okay.
So I went to the grocery store next to Chabad. And I thought, okay, I'm going to buy kosher meat and all my food kosher, and today's the day. So I want to see what this is all about. So I picked out the meats and some other things, and I went to the counter and I put them on the counter, and then I paid for it. And then as I picked up the bag to go, all of a sudden I just felt kind of like this light come down and just this joy. It's hard to put into words, but I had to stop in my tracks because I wasn't expecting it. I was, probably thinking, okay, what's my next errand? It just stopped me in my tracks, and it was so strong, and I thought, just from buying the kosher food, and I thought, wow, I was just so impressed, So I felt like Hashem was showing me that for a Jew, the kosher food, it's significant. It's something based on truth. It's something significant.
It's a sign that you're on the right path.
Yeah. And I told one of my friends about it, and they said, this is called, I think, Simchat Shel Mitzvah. Like, this is the joy of the mitzvah, the following one of the Jewish laws that's called mitzvot. I was feeling what's actually happening when I do that.
Okay, now mitzvah is like a commandment or a law.
Yeah. So following that. Then after the kosher food, okay, so then I became more and more committed, and I was officially in the process and working with the rabbis. And again, as I was studying with my rabbi from Chabad, he would be teaching me things sometimes from the Torah, from the Jewish Bible, and I would find such beauty.
Which is the Old Testament.
Which is called the Old Testament when people are looking from the perspective of the New Testament. And I would see, sometimes we would be studying things, and I think I have this sign from God that when I hear or see something that's really true, I get tears in my eyes, and it's not based on emotion, it's not sadness or happiness, it's kind of just a sign like, this is truth.
Yes. That
would happen to me so often when I was studying the basics of Judaism. So the next thing that happened was then I had to kosher my kitchen, so that was a process of a way to arrange the kitchen and clean things that had been used previously with non-kosher food. So I had a very nice rabbi who came, and he helped me to kosher my kitchen. And then, but at the same time, I was still having doubts because one of the big principles of koshering and eating kosher food is that you don't mix milk and meat in the same meal. So there's some